What is going on, everybody? The Cornerman MMA here, Ryan the Mighty Quinn, with, I don't want to screw up your title, the Executive Director of the California State Athletic Commission, Andy Foster. Mr. Foster, how are you, sir? Thank you for coming on.
Good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so Andy, as I was talking a little bit before we started live, there's a lot of criticism for judges, athletic commissions, and um, I have been critical in the past of judges, and I think that it comes to a point though where you could criticize myself included, but like let's figure out what's going on. I kind of look at it like this is your guys' game and we're playing it, but we would like to know a little bit of better interpretation of the rules. Now, some stuff has come out lately. I do see that Dean Thomas is going to the ABC conference. He's going to get certified as a judge, which I think is great because now someone's going to be in the booth that can explain some of the criteria. Spoke with Mike Mazzulli on stuff. I'm not sure if you saw the interview, but definitely wanted to ask you some things. But before we get into that, I was looking over your record. You were a fighter yourself, and I think that that's so great because a lot of the criticism is, oh, these officials and they need to be fighters to understand. I personally don't feel that way. I always make the analogy that I had a reconstructive surgery into my face, and I didn't disqualify the the physician that did the surgery because he didn't suffer the same injury. Um, but tell us a little about your career. I see a lot of submissions on there.
Oh yeah, I did it a long time ago. When
Mhm.
it was just kind of getting going. I think we started training jujitsu. Uh, I don't know, 96 or 97, something like that. And yeah, I did it for a long time. Still do it. I did it.
Great.
Yeah, did it a bunch of times this week already. So yeah.
Awesome. 96. I was going to be center field for the Yankees in 96. I didn't get
Okay.
into MMA till later. But I saw you fought Brian Ebersol. Man, that guy was tall. Well, everybody's tall for me, but I remember that fighter. That dude was tall. Um, so, all right, let's get into it with the scoring now. So, um, okay, one thing that I think is important that I would like to get an understanding on, I think fighters should understand, is impact and duration. Can you explain the impact and duration, please?
Impact is basically just another word for damage.
Okay.
This goes back a long time ago, just to give you some history on this. Um, Back in 2008, we were kicking around these words. This is how far this goes back. And John McCarthy wrote the new iteration of basically the scoring criteria. Not sure a lot of people know that, but I was in the room when he was writing it, so I know exactly what I'm talking about. He wrote it. Those are his words. And I feel like he did a really, really good job with that. I was always a proponent of just calling it what it is. Impact is damage. Okay.
Hmm.
We call it the 3 Ds, but really it's 2 Ds and an I. Okay. So so in a lot of respects, you know, you can have when I say the 3 Ds, I'm talking about the damage, the duration, the domination. But a lot of times it's hard to have that domination without inflicting some degree of damage. Okay. Now there are those fights where the guy just takes the person's back for the entire round and just basically lays on them, sits on them. Yeah, they've achieved something. They probably won that round, but I really feel like our referees should be trying to advance this sport so that it's more action based and not just allowing superior wrestling to stall down a fight. So we've got to have damage, and damage is, in my view, the most important of those three. Clearly, the most important.
Yeah. Okay. Um, Duration. So when I think of duration, first, like you said, like call it what it is. When I think of duration, from what I read in the rules, and correct me if I'm wrong, it makes me think of control. Like superior wrestling is control. Am I following correctly?
Duration is basically how long you've won that round.
Yep.
how long you're winning. Um, and if you've won for, let's say, 80% of that round, 4 minutes or longer, then that's one of the criterias that a judge is going to look at to say, okay, this person's won the vast majority of this round. Now, do I have another one of these criteria to go with it where I can start considering an eight? And if the person's won over 4 minutes, then there's probably another criteria that they can find, unless the person's just not fighting back very well.
Okay. Um, now, also, okay, so how much have you won? So that's kind of what I mean by control. So you can control a fight through wrestling, but you can also control the fight on your feet by prodding forward, by by just I call it cage control by controlling the center. That would be considered duration as well, right?
Not really.
Okay.
Duration is when you're on offensive attack and you're winning. Okay, you're
Okay.
winning. You're winning. Cage control is not a scorable thing unless you go to secondary and third criteria. Okay,
Okay.
I believe cage control is the third criteria. So
Okay.
and our judges don't get there. This thing is scored on damage. If people want to
Mhm.
learn anything about scoring, the person that damages their opponent the most is going to win that round 99 out of 100 times. That is what the judges are looking at. And the one time that they don't is the judges got that wrong. It should every time when carry the day. Who damaged more?
Okay. So this situation, I think that this is the situations where we lose our connection. Like this most recent fight that makes me think this. You might not have watched it. It wasn't under your jurisdiction. It was in Las Vegas. Maybe you did. A fan of the sport. But Andre Arlovski's last fight with I forget the gentleman's name, but Andre was coming forward a lot. The other opponent was showing impact. He was striking, wasn't really connecting. But I think what was going on was Andre was going forward. His body language, which is there's a term for it in the rules, was on the money, and he got the nod, even though he wasn't striking or connecting as much. Now, I think fights in this is where we kind of lose the connection there. What would you say about a situation like that? I don't know if you saw the fight or
I did not see that one, but I was talked to a lot about this fight. A lot of the
right.
judges told me about that fight. We're actually going to be watching this fight on the next Zoom call. There was a lot of
Okay.
talk about this particular round. So
Hmm.
I'm going to watch it probably 10 or 11 times here before too long because we can
Hmm.
get ready for our next call. But yeah, I know I kind of know what you're talking. There was a pretty big disagreement among good judges on that particular round. So that's kind of the round that we'd watch.
Yeah. Okay. Now, I had another question to follow off that, but that's fine. I think we hit that there. Um, the timidity usage. I heard you say on Ariel Hawani's show that you think that the referee should give something to score. I agree with you on there. So, what is an adjustment the refs could do to make things a little more physical, a little more fast paced tempo? Now, I know it's always mentioned in Pride they had the yellow card. We don't really have a yellow card here, but the judges do have. I mean, I'm sorry, I can't mess up that word. That's important. The refs have the opportunity to say that type of a warning, right? Like, what happens? Like, what is the American Commission's version of the yellow card?
The timidity foul. And
Okay.
we need to really start getting our referees to use that foul,
Hmm.
at least warn it so that more action can happen. You're not sitting around wanting to take points. Taking points is kind of a last resort type measure.
Yeah. Hmm.
But the referee cannot allow this kind of laying and wrestling for 4.5 minutes where a
Hmm.
superior wrestler is going to carry the day. We can't allow that.
Okay. Okay. Now, um, circling back to my analogy about like the physician and how I didn't disqualify him because he didn't suffer the same injury. Um, the surgeon he convinced me that he was an expert in his field. How did he do that? We had a clinical visit. We had a pre-op a pre-op meeting just to explain how we're going to get through this successfully. So we were all on the same page. Now, I said this to Mike too. Like when it comes to the judges, I don't need to know their name personally, but I feel like I don't speak to any judges. I don't even know who the judges are until the decision's being called. Now, um, I think in the meetings, they are rules meetings. They do a great job of expressing what's how to keep the fighters safe in the fights. Personally, my opinion, something I think could be utilized is what if a judge, now I know they don't do every fight, as we learned. There's multiple judges on staff um, per night. But what if a judge spoke at these post weigh-in meetings, just explaining, "Hey, listen, this is what we're looking for, damage." And then I feel like the judges can also say there, "Hey, listen, if you're a wrestler, I'm not going to let you lay like." Or maybe the ref can say, if you're a wrestler, I'm not going to let you lay on there. I'm going to call the timidity. Like that could be our time to communicate with one another. Do you think that could ever happen where a judge could speak at the post weigh-in meetings following a referee or something like that, just letting them know criteria and answering some questions?
I don't think that's the time, the day of the fight. I don't think
Oh no,
that's the time.
post weigh-in, like after weigh-ins, like when the post weigh-in
Or
meetings.
yeah, that's not the time. For one thing, we don't have many of our judges there at that time. Okay, they're not there. They're not in town. They're being flown in. They're probably in the air at that time. They usually get to the venue. Like if the fight's on Saturday, they arrive on sometime on late Friday afternoon. That's the time that a lot of them get in here. But they can certainly come on these Zoom calls. Everybody's invited. They can talk to the judges there. They can learn it there. We can have the referees explain it, what the judges are looking for. They know it as well. They teach it. They train it. Herb does a great job of explaining it to folks. But there needs to be this. We have. I feel like we have some folks that have a disconnect with what we're scoring, and then they're confused when the judges turn in a card where they feel like that they've won. Then there's those really close fights. I'm not trying to pick on her because I think she's one of the best fighters in the UFC. This Angela Hill is an excellent fighter, and
Hmm.
she's come up short on some of those judges' decisions. And those are decisions where if I'd been sitting there, I might have you can see that fight both ways. But if I'd been sitting there, I can see exactly what they saw. I saw what she did, but certainly she's a fighter who there for a while. And I don't want to tell you wrong. Maybe it was something like 0-4, 0-3, something like that, 0-4, whatever. And she could very well have been 4-0 or 3-0 or whatever.
Hmm.
Excellent fighter. Okay. Excellent fighter. And, but then there's some fighters where, this idea of just controlling without damage, the damage element needs to be there. Okay. Give you an example. There was a lot of debate on whether that round where Aljamain Sterling fought Peter Yan was an 8 or not. A lot of debate on that. And I'm not sitting here trying to tell you one way or another, but one thing that would have solidified that is once you've kind of realized, look, the choke's not going to work on this guy. He's defending it all day. If you switch to just a lot of striking there, especially especially if the round's winding down, that gives the judges something very easy, they can look at that and they can assess that. So now you've got domination, you've got duration, and then you would add the damage piece of it. But they didn't get there without the damage piece of it because the choke was being defended quite well by Mr. Yan.
Wouldn't a choke or submission attempt be considered an attack to score?
If they feel like it's very threatening, of course. And there was one time, maybe two times, where it was very threatening. That's why I think if you want to score an 8 on that round, you're absolutely justified in scoring an 8 on that round. A lot of people thought it was an 8. I'm not going to argue with them, but where the judges, to make it real easy for them, make it real, there's no confusion. Is everybody understands strikes to the face? If you're in control, that's hard to argue that's not and then there you can create some volume when you're scoring these things. Though the immediate is scored as weight heavier than the cumulative. Okay,
Mhm.
so you want to really lay some heavy strikes down as opposed to just basically barely hitting the person for a cumulative effect.
I got that. It sounds like striking is a little more favored than grappling attempts then in a situation when they're on the ground. Would that be the case? Or is it just more explicit or not explicit? Is it just uh, more I can't think of the word, but okay, just yeah, I guess that's the question.
They're supposed to be equal, but I think to your point, I almost feel like I feel like what you said, while it's not exactly supposed to be that way, I do believe that's the case. And when I say that, I don't mean just striking on the feet. I'm talking about on the ground. You get positions. I feel like that the strikes, as opposed to submission attempts, are weighed heavier for a judge in a judge's mind because it's easier for them to see what's happening.
Mhm.
Strikes to the face are very easy to understand. Okay, this guy's
Yeah.
getting hit in the face. People don't know how deep that choke is. Even if you're a BJJ black belt and you've got or a high level wrestler, and we have a lot of judges that are both. If they're sitting there and they're not sure, they got angles, they're trying to look at the monitor. They're not sure how deep that thing is, but a strike to the face is hard to, especially multiple ones. If you have a choice, and say you're on somebody's back and you've got good control, and
Mhm.
all things being equal, I believe the judges score those strikes to the back, not fouls, not to the back of the head.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I
Yeah,
know what you're saying.
I think that they probably score those heavier than I know they do. They score those heavier than a submission attempt if somebody's defending pretty well.
Okay. Um, yeah, I could see that. I just feel that like okay, you know what's a good example of this? I don't know if you saw the UFC last weekend, but Valentina versus Talia. Did you see the fight or the first few rounds?
I did, yes.
Okay, like I think that first round is a good example of what we're talking about. One of the judges scored that first round for Valentina. I felt it was clear that it was Talia's because of well, Valentina was doing to your point. She was doing those. I'm not sure if you see on the camera, but she was doing those punches. Um, but I think I counted like 5 or 6 across the neck attempts for rear naked chokes by Talia. And I just felt that that was clearly her round. She had the back control. She didn't earn the takedown, so to speak. It was a slip, but she showed the duration and she had the attempts. Um, I'm not asking you to score the round. I felt that she won that round, and it sounds like, but like you said, that those strikes were pretty heavily scored. Um, I guess then it comes down to preference there. Like what I mean, I feel like I would hate to negate submission attempts in a scoring manner.
Well, I don't think that I don't want you to think that that's what I'm saying because we definitely
No, I'm
will
not.
have
I'm not.
submission attempts, but
Mhm,
just in the reality of what we're talking about,
mhm,
I do believe the judges look at that. It's just easier for them to get like you don't know really how deep that choke is until somebody
mhm.
taps or until they're showing signs of that this is problematic. They show
Right.
that, then of course the judge gets it. But
Mhm,
I think the defensive fighters say, especially once they've gotten to higher levels, Bellator, UFC, something like that, they're able to mask how bad something is pretty well. Okay,
mhm.
and they're doing that because they're pretty comfortable being in these spots. They train them all the time, and they don't panic. I guess that's the word. They don't panic. So
Right.
without that panic, it doesn't look like it don't give the judges a whole lot of like, how deep is this? This thing really problematic for them or whatever. But the punches or the strikes or whatever you want to call it
Mhm.
from the top. I mean, that's just easier for them to get. But I'm not sitting here trying to advocate striking over grappling. I'm just giving you
Yeah.
in
No,
real
I
life
I
what's
I
easier.
understand. Like it's a fight at the end of the day, and what looks more like a fight. So I get that. Now, last thing, I did promise you to be under 20 minutes. So I know open scoring is over. Is always talked about. I'm in favor of it, but not to the level of most. I feel like that we're not really there yet. I feel like that we got to crawl before we walk, and that's walking. I feel that we still have to understand what's going on because let's just for argument's sake, let's say a judge screws up the first round, then if it's an open score, then the coach and team is going to mismanage the rest of the fight based on the open scoring. Um, I like what you said about on Ariel's show about it. I just feel like what could we do? What else could we do? So talk about the Zoom meetings. Just talk about stuff we could discuss on those Zoom meetings before we even get there.
Well, I mean, the Zoom meetings are, we have people from wherever around the country, around the world in some respects. They send in rounds that they would like for the judges to examine, judges to look at, whatever.
Okay.
This Arlovsky round that you mentioned earlier in the show is something that people are interested in looking at. Okay? Um, you know, so yeah, you just send it in, and if it's something that a good many of the higher level judges are interested in talking about, we talk about it. And
When are these meetings? I'm sorry.
I
When are they?
have
I would
them.
look.
I started them during COVID because just trying to stay busy.
Mhm.
It was
Yeah.
kind of a lot of uncertainties during COVID. But now that California is really busy again, and I can't do them as much, but I try to do them about every quarter, something like that.
I would love to hop on, and I'm going to email you after. Now, but before we close, I want to make a point of a fight that I thought of that where the judges did an outstanding job that could have been screwed up, and they nailed it. Um, Chito Vera versus Rob Font. It was a few weeks ago. Now, Rob, for 4.5 minutes, was controlling the rounds. In three different rounds, Chito rocked him and dropped him and bloodied him with like the last 30, 35 seconds. Now, the rounds were kind of even though it was leaning Rob's way. And then, bam, Cheeto put the stamp on that. I don't think people give judges the credit in fights like that, where like that's a hard fight. That's actually a hard fight to score that they don't realize. And I was so happy that the judges did a good job on that fight. So I hope that people keep that in mind as well. But Andy Foster, thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming on. Um, like I said, like I would like to see the judges talk a little bit in those meetings, but as you said, it's not really that easy. Um, but we're all talking now, and I'm looking forward to the future of the sport
Thank you for having me on, Ron.
for sure. And I'll be on that Zoom. I'm going to email you about it. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Okay.
All right, buddy. Thank
Bye
you.
bye. Thank you.
Yeah.